Did your family walk on eggshells or explode without warning?
Imagine yourself entrenched in the relentless grind of a 12-hour workday at a bustling marketing firm nestled in the heart of Chicago's Loop District, where the fluorescent lights buzz overhead like persistent insects and your inbox overflows with demands that never seem to ebb, until suddenly your vision blurs at the edges and your legs give way beneath you, sending you crumpling to the carpeted floor of your cubicle in a heap that draws concerned murmurs from colleagues who hover uncertainly before one of them dials emergency services with trembling fingers. The paramedics arriving shortly thereafter to load you onto a stretcher amid a flurry of questions you can barely muster responses for as they whisk you away to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where the emergency room doctors begin their thorough examinations, prodding and scanning while diagnosing a severe case of exhaustion intertwined with dehydration and skyrocketing stress levels that could overwhelm even the sturdiest individual in this high-pressure American workforce. They inquire about your emergency contacts right away, listing your sister Lisa as the primary, followed by your father Robert, who has spent decades toiling as a mechanic in the industrial shadows of Gary, Indiana, and even your brother Mike, whose life has been a series of unstable jobs that shift like sand dunes, placing urgent calls and leaving voicemails that emphasize the gravity of your collapse in hopes of summoning familial support. Yet as the afternoon stretches into evening within the sterile confines of the ER, your phone remains eerily quiet on the bedside table, emitting no vibrations or rings to pierce the monotonous beeping of the monitoring equipment that tracks your fragile vital signs, leaving you to grapple with the dawning realization of profound isolation even as nurses offer reassuring smiles and adjust your Ford drip to stabilize the chaos brewing inside your body. At 42 years old, you have long positioned yourself as the pillar of endurance in your family dynamic, a single mother to a teenage son named Tyler, who immerses himself in video games as an escape from the realities of suburban life, while navigating the emotional minefield of relatives who treat gatherings like sporadic inconveniences rather than sacred bonds, and now piecing together snippets of conversation from the medical staff who confirm that notifications have been dispatched, but no one has arrived or even acknowledged the outreach. A wave of disbelief washes over you, compounded by the cultural expectation in Middle America that family rallies during crises like this one, much like the neighbors who drop off casseroles after a loss, or the community barbecues that mask deeper fractures beneath their communal cheer. As twilight filters through the half-drawn blinds overlooking the bustling streets below, a compassionate nurse hands you your phone once more to check for any updates, and in a haze of lingering disorientation, you instinctively open social media, scrolling through feeds filled with the mundane triumphs of acquaintances until your sister's post leaps out like a betrayal etched in pixels. A vibrant image of her backyard barbecue where her children chase each other across the manicured lawn, her husband mans the grill with an apron tied around his waist, and the entire scene glows under festive string lights that cast a warm, inviting hue, accompanied by her caption reading Family Day. No drama for once, adorned with a cascade of heart symbols that twist the knife deeper into your already aching heart, prompting you to envision her casually dismissing the incoming hospital alerts amid the laughter and sizzle of burgers, prioritizing this curated slice of domestic bliss over the sister who has historically shouldered their burdens from financial hiccups to emotional upheavals without a second thought. The irony burns fiercely as you recall past instances where you dropped everything to assist, such as the night Lisa phoned in tears during her marital rough patch 2 years prior, prompting you to drive through pouring rain with comfort food from a familiar corner diner only for her gratitude to evaporate once stability returned. Or the times you covered unexpected repair costs for Dad's aging garage after he weathered yet another economic downturn in the Rust Belt, all while maintaining your own precarious balance in the corporate ladder climb that defines so many lives in this demographic of overworked professionals aged 35 to 65 who juggle careers, parenting, and the unspoken pressure to uphold family legacies despite the toll it exacts. Restraining the urge to lash out immediately, you allow the resentment to ferment quietly, your mind replaying the voicemail transcripts the nurse mentions in passing. But around midnight, when the ward quiets to a hush broken only by distant sirens, The pent-up frustration propels you to action as you seize your phone once again and navigate to her post, typing a measured yet pointed comment that reads, "Sounds like pure bliss. Wish I could partake, but I'm sidelined in the ER all by my lonesome this evening." Strategically tagging the hospital's official account to amplify the subtle shade and ensure it reaches beyond her echo chamber. Observing with a mix of vindication and apprehension as engagement notifications begin to flood in from shared connections who respond with queries and wishes, unaware of the underlying narrative of abandonment that fuels your words. This small act of retaliation provides a fleeting surge of empowerment, akin to landing a precise counterpunch in a bout where you've long been on the defensive, yet the backlash unfolds rapidly with Lisa's puzzled reply popping up almost instantly, inquiring about your well-being in a tone that feigns surprise, followed by an influx of messages from coworkers piecing together the incident from office gossip, all of which draws the attention of the returning nurse who, sensing the shift in your demeanor, gently retrieves the device while announcing that an incoming call from someone claiming to be your father is lighting up the line. His familiar gravelly voice crackling through as you hesitantly accept, bracing for a torrent of explanations or perhaps the hollow excuses that have characterized your interactions for years, leaving you suspended in a web of anticipation about whether this outreach signals genuine concern or merely the prelude to another round of familial demands that could unravel the fragile peace you've only just begun to reclaim. Emerging from the depths of unconsciousness in the intensive care unit felt akin to breaking through a dense, unyielding fog that had enveloped my senses after days of blurred oblivion, where the stark overhead lights pierced my eyelids like unwelcome spotlights and the relentless hum of life support machines underscored every shallow breath I took, marking the passage of 3 full days since my unceremonious tumble in the office that had upended the carefully constructed routine of my existence as a 42-year-old marketing executive navigating the unforgiving corridors of corporate ambition in Chicago, compounded by the solitary demands of raising my 16-year-old son Tyler through his phases of teenage detachment and the lingering echoes of a family that had always extracted more than it ever reciprocated. The attending physician, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a clipboard clutched like a shield, entered shortly after my initial stirring to deliver the verdict in measured tones, attributing my collapse to a toxic cocktail of chronic burnout, unmanaged hypertension that I dismissed amid endless deadlines, and the dehydration born from skipped lunches in pursuit of that elusive promotion which promised financial security but delivered only deeper exhaustion. A plight all too familiar to the demographic of midlife Americans grinding through similar battles in boardrooms and break rooms across the nation, where the myth of work-life balance crumbles under the weight of familial expectations and economic pressures that leave little room for vulnerability. My room afforded a narrow view of the Chicago River snaking through the cityscape, its murky waters reflecting the overcast sky in a way that mirrored the turmoil churning within me as I fumbled for my phone, its screen illuminating with the staggering tally of 65 missed calls that painted a damning portrait of neglect, dominated by repeated attempts from Lisa interspersed with numbers from distant relatives like Aunt Marjorie, the inveterate gossip who thrived on dissecting family lore at every reunion, yet none of those calls had translated into physical presence. No hurried footsteps in the hallway or bedside vigils that the movies always glorified as the hallmark of unbreakable bonds in our culture of holiday toasts and backyard gatherings. A wry chuckle escaped my lips despite the oxygen mask's tug, the sound hollow against the clinical backdrop as I pondered the absurdity of it all, how my kin had apparently deemed my near-death episode unworthy of disruption while I lay tethered to tubes, evoking that classic Midwestern humor in the face of heartache where you joke about relatives showing up only for the well-reading, though beneath the levity simmered a bitterness that tasted like overbrewed coffee from the hospital vending machine, prompting reflections on past sacrifices such as the overtime shifts I'd pulled to fund Lisa's impulsive home renovations during her divorce scare or the weekends devoted to sorting Dad's cluttered garage after his latest health scare, only to receive perfunctory thanks that evaporated like morning mist. The door swung open then, admitting Aunt Marjorie with her trademark tote bag bulging with homemade lemon bars wrapped in foil, her arrival announced by the squeak of sensible shoes on linoleum as she settled into the vinyl chair with an air of practiced sympathy, launching immediately into a recounting of the infamous family barbecue that had unfolded without me, describing how Lisa's hot dogs had charred to unrecognizable husks on the grill yet elicited collective laughter, Dad regaling the group with tales of my supposed workaholic tendencies as if my collapse were merely an anecdotal footnote in their idyllic afternoon, all while she unpacked the treats whose tangy sweetness clashed with the metallic tang of my four. Her words laced with the subtle undercurrents of family lore that hinted at Dad's mounting financial strains since his retirement from the auto repair trade proved less lucrative than anticipated, a clue that cast his earlier text in a more ominous light amid the vagueness of "we need you now." I nibbled at the bar, masking my growing ire behind nods of feigned interest as she prattled on about Mike's purported stabilization in a delivery job that sounded as transient as his previous endeavors, her anecdotes serving to underscore the chasm between their insulated world and my solitary fight for recovery, fueling the dilemma of whether to voice the hurt that clawed at my chest or let it fester into something more calculated, especially as memories resurfaced of Lisa's casual borrowing of $5,000 during her marital woes, a debt she'd repaid with radio silence once her life stabilized, leaving me to juggle Tyler's extracurricular fees on a stretched budget. Seizing a momentary lull when Marjorie excused herself to fetch vending machine coffee, I accessed the dormant family group chat on my tablet, that digital relic from last Christmas's contentious dispute over Grandma's heirloom clock, and impulsively shared an archived snapshot of Lisa's disastrous garage sale from a decade prior where she'd offloaded mismatched junk under rainy skies, appending a caption that read, the good old days of family cleanups and unexpected messes. Brings back memories, doesn't it? Designed to prod at her curated perfection without overt malice, a witty leak of a minor secret about her hoarding tendencies that I knew would ripple through their notifications during her next mundane errand, providing a cathartic sting reminiscent of the sibling spats from our youth when she'd pilfer my favorite outfits for school dances, all while the satisfaction bloomed warm in my chest like contraband smuggled past the nurse's station. Marjorie returned oblivious to my machinations, resuming her chatter about how the family was now coming together in light of the circulating rumors, her optimism clashing with the skepticism hardening in my gaze as I weighed the cost of re-engaging with their orbit against the freedom of continued detachment. Internal conflict amplified by the doctor's update on my impending discharge that loomed like an uncertain horizon, until my phone stirred once more with a persistent buzz, revealing Dad's text in full detail that demanded immediate attention and thrust me into a vortex of indecision about extending the olive branch or allowing the silence to echo indefinitely as the first step toward reclaiming my narrative. Discharge papers clutched in my hand like a ticket to freedom mingled with trepidation, I stepped out of the hospital into the crisp autumn air of Chicago that carried the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant lakefront breezes, hailing a cab that navigated the congested streets toward my modest apartment in Wicker Park where the neighborhood's eclectic mix of young professionals and families bustled about their weekend routines, a stark contrast to the isolation that had defined my recent days in the ICU, now at 42 years old confronting the fragility of the life I'd built as a single mother to Tyler who, at 16, navigated his world through headphones and late-night gaming sessions that served as a shield against the uncertainties of adolescence in this sprawling urban landscape. The ride provided an unwelcome interlude for rumination on Lisa's evasive voice message that I'd replayed obsessively during quiet moments in recovery, her words dripping with contrived remorse about the hospital notification slipping through the cracks amid the chaos of her children's extracurricular schedules and her husband's demanding shifts at the insurance firm. Yet the more I dissected it, the more it rang hollow, like the apologies exchanged at obligatory family reunions where surface pleasantries concealed the undercurrents of unresolved grievances from our shared upbringing in the working-class enclaves of Indiana, prompting me to delve deeper into her social media archives. Once settled on the worn couch with a steaming mug of herbal tea that did little to soothe the raw edges of betrayal, Scrolling past the polished veneer of her recent posts revealed a pattern of curated contentment masking deeper fissures, including a series of now-deleted interactions with acquaintances who alluded to her clandestine meetings with a fellow book club member whose profile hinted at the thrill of forbidden connections, a revelation that transported me back to 2 summers ago when, over pitchers of margaritas at a dimly lit bar on Division Street, she had confided in me about the marital ennui that gnawed at her, extracting a promise of secrecy in exchange for my empathetic ear and subsequent cover stories during her absences, only for that trust to erode when she failed to reciprocate during my own crises, such as the time I called her in the dead of night after Tyler's school suspension, receiving only a curt text about her being swamped with PDA obligations. This twist illuminated the "no drama" caption of her barbecue post as a deliberate facade, a digital proclamation of stability, while she juggled duplicity that mirrored the sibling rivalry we'd harbored since childhood, exemplified by the incident in our late teens when she had surreptitiously taken my carefully saved allowance to fund a weekend trip with friends, leaving me short for college application fees and forcing me to explain the shortfall to our skeptical parents during a tense dinner. Around the Formica table in Dad's modest kitchen, an act of theft that she later dismissed as youthful impulsivity, but which had sown seeds of wariness that persisted through adulthood. The anger coalesced into a focused resolve as I considered the financial toll of her past indiscretions, including the $5,000 she'd borrowed under the guise of legal fees during her separation, a sum that vanished into her lifestyle without repayment and compelled me to forego a family vacation the following year, all while Dad's recent call lingered in my mind with its vague allusions to old debts resurfacing that hinted at interconnected family vulnerabilities beyond mere oversight in my hospital ordeal. Wrestling with the ethical quandary of direct confrontation that might shatter the tenuous threads binding us versus a subtler form of accountability, I crafted my retaliation during a lull when Tyler texted from his friend's house about staying for pizza night, logging into an anonymous email service to compose a message to her supervisor at the real estate agency where she peddled suburban dreams, framing it as feedback from a prospective buyer who had observed her frequent lateness to viewings attributed to personal distractions that undermined professional reliability, infusing the note with just enough specificity about her book club alibis to evoke unease without explicit accusation, a clever maneuver reminiscent of the passive-aggressive notes we'd pass in high school. Hallways to expose each other's minor deceptions, ensuring it landed like a precision-guided reminder of reciprocity in our imbalanced ledger. The act yielded a surge of vindication that warmed me more than the Afghan draped over my knees, laced with a touch of sardonic humor as I imagined her paling during the next staff meeting, her flawless image cracking under the weight of unintended consequences, yet the light vulgarity of the situation, what a convoluted mess of half-truths she'd woven, tempered the triumph with reflection on how such revenges perpetuated the cycle even as they empowered my sense of agency in a narrative where I'd long played the enabler. As evening descended and the apartment filled with the soft glow of street lamps filtering through the windows, Dad's promised visit materialized earlier than expected with Mike in the passenger seat of his battered pickup, their arrival announced by the crunch of gravel in the parking lot as they ascended the stairs bearing grocery bags stuffed with staples from the local market, initiating an awkward gathering around my kitchen table where small talk about the weather and Tyler's soccer prospects masked the undercurrents of purpose until Dad broached the subject of his text with halting explanations about mounting bills from an unexpected roof repair on his Gary home that strained his fixed income, probing for my expertise in navigating financial aid programs that I'd mastered through years of budgeting for our household. But the conversation veered when Mike's phone rang with a call from Lisa, his response escalating into a heated exchange that I overheard in fragments about her share of the money and the urgency of pooling resources before external pressures mounted, a cryptic argument that suggested ulterior motives tied to the inheritance from Mom's estate and thrust me into a whirlwind of suspicion about the true catalysts behind their belated attention, compelling me to feign nonchalance, while inwardly bracing for the revelations that could redefine our fractured bonds in ways I had never anticipated. Returning to the familiar confines of my Wicker Park apartment after the hospital discharge brought a deceptive sense of normalcy that clashed with the undercurrents of unresolved tension lingering from the family's sporadic overtures. Where the space now felt constricted by stacks of unopened mail on the counter and the faint, lingering aroma of takeout containers left by Tyler during his extended stays at friends' houses to avoid the awkwardness of my absence, all while at 42I. Grappled with reintegrating into the daily rhythm of single parenthood and professional recovery in a city that pulsed with indifferent energy outside my window. The neighborhood's weekend foot traffic a reminder of the lives continuing unabated despite personal upheavals that tested the resilience many in our age bracket cultivated through sheer determination amid economic squeezes and familial expectations. Lisa's email arrived that morning like an unsolicited catalog of contrition, its paragraphs overflowing with elaborate justifications for the missed calls, blaming a glitchy phone app during her hectic PTA bake sale preparations and her husband's back-to-back overtime at the claims department, culminating in a tentative invitation to join them for Sunday dinner at their tidy Evanston residence, complete with promises of homemade lasagna and open discussions to mend the rift. Yet the words struck me as a polished performance akin to the corporate presentations I delivered weekly. Designed to placate rather than penetrate the hurt that festered from her barbecue post, still circulating in group chats, with sympathetic comments from cousins who had no inkling of the deeper narrative. I lingered over the screen in my kitchen nook, sunlight slanting across the table laden with Tyler's forgotten homework, torn between the nostalgic pull of our shared history. Late-night confessions during childhood sleepovers at Dad's Gary bungalow, where we'd plot escapes from the monotony of Rust Belt summers, and the fresh betrayal that echoed the pattern of her extracting support during her crises, such as the impromptu weekend getaway I'd funded after her separation scare only for her to sideline me when Tyler's school fees mounted unexpectedly, leaving me to scrape by on credit card advances while she posted about her blessed life on social feeds. Dad's subsequent phone call layered on the complexity, his voice carrying the gravelly fatigue of a man in his late 60s who had traded wrenches for retirement puzzles, elaborating on the text's urgency as a plea for guidance through a labyrinth of pension shortfalls exacerbated by a leaky roof that had flooded his basement workshop during recent storms. Seeking my analytical skills honed in marketing trends to decipher eligibility for government assistance programs that eluded his grasp. But the conversation skirted the edges of something larger, his hesitations hinting at interconnected woes involving Mike's unstable finances and Lisa's unspoken contributions to a collective pot that now teetered on the brink. The dilemma intensified upon Tyler's return home that afternoon, his lanky frame filling the doorway with backpack slung over one shoulder as he inquired casually about Grandma's absence during my illness, contrasting it with her attentive visits after his playground mishap years ago, forcing me to fabricate a vague explanation about scheduling conflicts while inwardly seething at the inconsistency that bred doubt in the younger generation about familial reliability, a cultural thread in American households where grandparents symbolized unwavering support amid the fraying safety nets of modern life. Amid this emotional churn, the impulse for revenge sharpened into focus during an evening scroll through digitized family albums on my laptop, alighting on a snapshot from last Independence Day barbecue by Lake Michigan where Lisa had orchestrated the perfect tableau of unity with her clan, and inspired by that image, I composed a group message to the extended Harper relatives, artfully including her professional contacts in the distribution list under the guise of a collaborative chain, outlining a fabricated investment seminar tailored to Dad's predicament with details that subtly mirrored Lisa's own discretionary spending patterns uncovered in her transaction alerts from our past loan discussions, phrasing it as communal advice on avoiding pitfalls like extracurricular expenses that drained resources, a witty redirection of their presumptions that positioned me as the sage advisor while sowing seeds of scrutiny toward her without direct indictment, evoking the sly barbs we'd exchange as teens over shared bathroom mirrors to highlight each other's hypocrisies. The dispatch brought a chuckle laced with ironic amusement, the kind that surfaces in quiet moments of self-assertion after years of deference, as I pictured the ripple effects during her next Realtor networking event where whispers might undermine her poise, tempered by the light vulgarity of the farce. What a tangled web of expectations they'd spun, expecting my perpetual generosity without reciprocity. Yet the humor dissipated when Dad's truck rumbled into the lot uninvited that evening, Mike accompanying him with armfuls of grocery provisions from the discount chain near the Indiana border. Their presence transforming my living room into an impromptu council where they unpacked items with forced casualness, steering talk toward neutral territories like Tyler's upcoming tryouts and the Bears' faltering season before Dad circled back to the inheritance entanglement from Mom's passing a decade prior, describing it as bureaucratic snarls over undisclosed assets in joint accounts that required my endorsement to access amid rising legal fees from opportunistic challengers. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken agendas as Mike shifted uncomfortably on the couch, his eyes avoiding mine when I pressed for transparency on the "we need you" phrasing, offering only murmurs about collaborative solutions, but the true pivot came when he mentioned retrieving a forgotten photo album from the truck, an innocuous gesture that led me to rifle through it alone later under the guise of nostalgia, only to unearth a faded image from my early 20s showing Dad in consultation with a shadowy financial advisor whose features triggered a vague recollection of hushed arguments during family dinners about side arrangements to offset shop debts, a discovery that linked directly to the stressors precipitating my collapse through years of covert support I'd provided unknowingly, hurtling me toward an inevitable confrontation where the veils of pretense would finally lift in revelations that promised to reshape the very foundations of our bonds. The photo album splayed across my bedspread in the subdued lamplight of my Wicker Park bedroom evoked a Pandora's trove of suppressed histories that unraveled the threads of my family's enigmatic behaviors with startling precision. Its pages brimming with sepia-toned snapshots of Dad in his vigorous 30s shaking hands with a slickly attired consultant at a bustling Gary Auto Expo from the mid-80s, accompanied by Mom's looping script on the reverse identifying it as the arrangement that altered our path forever. And nestled amid the creased mementos lay a brittle newspaper article detailing an embezzlement probe at his repair shop, where discrepancies in parts inventory had nearly toppled the business during the recession's grip on the steel towns. A scandal he'd concealed through makeshift loans and side hustles that explained the perpetual undercurrent of financial precarity shadowing our holidays and the unspoken alliances I'd unwittingly fortified over decades by funneling my bonuses into their black holes without demanding full transparency. At 42, poring over these artifacts with Tyler's distant video game echoes filtering from the living room, the mosaic coalesced into a narrative of inherited burdens that transcended mere neglect during my collapse, revealing how the ICU silence stemmed from their calculated assessment that my survival might complicate access to Mom's concealed savings account designed as a buffer against that long-buried fallout. A fund now entangled in legal claims from the era's disgruntled creditors, whose resurgence threatened to expose the entire edifice, positioning me not as a cherished daughter, but as the indispensable signatory whose endorsement could salvage their facade amid the American dream's harsh underbelly where middle-class families masked such skeletons behind barbecues and ballgames. The moral crossroads loomed starkly as morning broke with the family's orchestrated convergence in my apartment, Lisa, materializing at the door with a bakery box of glazed donuts and a tentative smile that faltered upon glimpsing the album propped open on the coffee table like an accusation, the air saturating with the aroma of fresh pastry clashing against the tension as Dad and Mike settled uneasily on the sectional, their expressions a blend of paternal remorse and fraternal deflection while we circled the topic over steaming mugs, until Dad exhaled the confession in halting fragments about the shop's pilfered funds from a shady supplier partnership that Mom had papered over with her secret investments, the inheritance now a contested lifeline requiring my ratification to bypass the mounting attorney fees from revived litigations that could strip them bare. This disclosure ignited the internal schism where empathy warred with indignation, my thoughts drifting to Tyler's college aspirations that the proceeds could secure even as revulsion surged at their prioritization of assets over my bedside vigil, a dilemma that provoked audience-like qualms about capitulating to such opportunism in the name of blood ties that our culture romanticized through tales of redemption at Thanksgiving feasts. Yet the levity pierced through when Mike attempted a feeble quip about sticking closer than gum on a fender in familial crises, the pun landing with a thud that elicited my wry internal snort at the absurdity of their predicament, laced with the mild exasperation of what a knotted pretzel of deceptions they'd maintained, expecting my unwavering role as the fixer despite the toll it exacted on my health and autonomy. The revenge unfurled methodically from there, a culmination of prior jabs refined into precision as I feigned agreement to review the documents over lunch, excusing myself to the study where I scanned the clipping and dispatched it to the family solicitor with annotated discrepancies highlighting the overlooked liabilities, simultaneously forwarding an anonymous précis to the claimant's representatives that reframed the assets as tainted without fully incriminating Dad. A shrewd pivot that compelled them to negotiate on equal footing while eroding Lisa's composure as her device chimed with repercussions from my earlier professional nudge about her distractions, her pallor betraying the unraveling of her dual life born from the same generational pressures that had driven her book club dalliances as an escape valve for the inherited strain. The afternoon confrontation escalated around the dining table strewn with legal printouts and cooling coffee, voices rising in a symphony of admissions where Lisa conceded her infidelity as a misguided rebellion against the financial secrecy that mirrored her marital voids, tearfully recounting how the hospital alert had drowned in her notifications during a clandestine lunch that she rationalized as harmless respite, while Mike divulged ignoring the calls amid a casino binge to offset Dad's arrears, his regret manifesting in fidgety apologies that humanized yet didn't absolve the collective lapse, each unveiling amplifying the conflict's crescendo until Dad's voice cracked with a plea for understanding rooted in paternal fears of destitution echoing his own youth, forging an atmosphere rife with the precipice of rupture or reluctant reconciliation that left me oscillating between forgiveness for Tyler's sake and the allure of severance. As the gathering dispersed into uneasy partings with promises of follow-up consultations, the narrative looped back in my mind to that pivotal ICU awakening amid the symphony of monitors and the glow of Dad's text, where the weight of their belated necessity crystallized into a profound clarity, prompting a subtle smile to curve my lips not from malice, but from the empowerment of boundaries asserted at last, before I permitted my eyes to drift shut once more, the ambiguity lingering like an unresolved chord had I pledged to sign and weave the family anew with cautious threads, or elected to dissolve into a self-forged solitude unburdened by their entanglements, the choice suspended in the ether to provoke lingering contemplation on the true price of loyalty in the quiet aftermath of crisis.